I'm Dr. Greg Guzman. I'm the Vice President of Institutional Advancement here at the seminary. And to lead us off in prayer, I'd like to invite up our President, Dr. Brent Sleesman. Brent?
Let's pray. Father, thank you for the opportunity you've given us to come together today. Thank you for just the beauty of your creation, the time of year where we can be confronted with your gift and generosity to us as we think about celebrating Thanksgiving, as we prepare for Christmas. Father, let us be mindful of your Spirit's work. We thank you for allowing us to gather today to just reflect upon the work that you're doing in your kingdom. And Father, I pray that as we eat and fellowship and learn, allow us to draw closer to you, closer to each other. We pray for Dan today and his presentation and just ask that our time today brings glory to you. Father, thank you for allowing us to be present and just ask that you continue to lead us as we go forward in our lives and as we serve you in your kingdom. We pray this in your holy name. Amen.
Well, thank you all for coming out on this absolutely gorgeous and beautiful day. Is this amazing? Are we almost at the beginning of December? We're in the 60s. I think it's supposed to get warmer next week as well, so that's wonderful. I have the pleasure today of introducing to you my friend, my colleague, Dan Rogers. I'm going to read his bio to you, but I have to let you know that this is just the very short version, as we were talking in my office beforehand. If I were to give you Dan's entire bio, we wouldn't have a speaker today. So if I can, Dan grew up in Lorain County in Ohio and at an early age experienced the ill effects of generational poverty. As a result of his childhood experiences, Dan decided to pursue a lifelong goal of challenging the systems that create the very cycles of poverty. In 2001, Dan continued his passion to reverse the cycles by serving on staff at Cherry Street Mission Ministries located in Toledo. In July 2005, he was named Cherry Street's president and CEO. Dan is the recipient of the 2009 Jefferson Award for Public Service, and in 2014, he received the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Entrepreneurial and Business Excellence Hall of Fame. In 2017, he was the recipient of the Governor's Medal of Courage for Ohio, and is also a consultant to nonprofits as a leadership coach. Currently, Dan is spearheading the development of Cherry Street Life's Revitalization Center, which is an adult career and vocational school. Dan and his wife, Crystal, are founders of a leadership and curriculum development ministry called Soma Ministries International. They have 5 children, 3 daughters-in-law, and 8 grandchildren. Please help me welcome Dan Rogers.
Hey, Greg. How are you, man? Thank you so much. Well, good afternoon, everyone. Wow, not even a little love, huh? Okay. A little, just say, hey, good morning. Actually, it's good afternoon. That would be good. I would like to appreciate, first of all, the fact there's a clock in the room. You're going to come to appreciate that in about 45 minutes. But I deeply want to appreciate the fact that you've all taken a moment out of your afternoon to assemble here at Weinbrenner, and certainly a moment of gratitude for the organizers of this event annually, and certainly for the kind invitation that got me here today. So I appreciate that deeply, and appreciate the moments that are here. I am like you, that I don't think there's a hair's bit of difference between Toledo and Findlay. We actually are in Northwest Ohio. What happens there happens here, and what happens here happens there. We are like a body deeply connected. And if something positive and good is happening in one place, it's going to impact and have an effect on what's happening someplace else. So I deeply appreciate the demographics of Findlay, always have appreciated the demographics of Findlay, and the dynamic position that you hold both geographically and socially from even a socioeconomic framework in Northwest Ohio. In my opinion, this is the last I'll say about it, I think a lot more attention from up north needs to be paid attention to what's going on here in Findlay. And I think that can happen over the course of time. So today my topic is to chat about this word that you have in front of you. I'm a gospel guy. This isn't necessarily a gospel presentation, but I think it would be helpful for you to understand my framework. I'm a gospel guy. I actually believe in the gospel of Jesus Christ, and I believe that framework informs my daily decisions on a basis. Now, I'm not here to persuade you one way or the other of my belief system. I think it's just important for you to understand where I'm coming from. I believe that the gospel, once you engage with the gospel, disrupts your life. Contrary to popular belief where, I became a Christian and my life became peaceful, that's not been my experience on any level. As a matter of fact, I think the gospel creates chaos. One of the first things I learned back in 1977 when I became a Christian was I had to stop smoking weed. That was a big disruptor for me. Yeah, I was like, wait, but it's so good, and it's from the earth. And God made it. It's natural. So I had to get over that, right? There's tons of things I had to get over. But that's what good relationships do, don't they? A good relationship actually brings far more disruption than it brings calm, like marriage. My wife and I have been married for 40 years. And I got to tell you, after 40 years, this lady, as of even this morning, disrupts my life immeasurably. I mean, my life would be so much easier if she would just, get along. But she's not designed to get along. She's designed to create chaos. She's designed to disrupt normal flow of things. By the way, if she was standing up here giving the presentation, she would give you a long litany of the way that, of course, I disrupt her life on a moment-by-moment basis. So I'm not entirely sure we appreciate this word enough. It seems like most people find themselves in crisis, or most organizations that find themselves in crisis are trying desperately to get out of it. My objective with you today is to talk you out of that. Is to talk you out of that intuitive, impulsive move to try to calm everything down. As a matter of fact, the calmer life is, the worse life is. If you put 100% calm into a human life, you call that death. You no longer have a pulse. Humans were designed by God to be completely erratic, completely by design chaotic. And it's only the order of the things that we bring to it, not the things that we bring to change it or to act like it doesn't exist, but to harness it, to harness the chaos. And then if you get into a place in your life where you can actually begin to design some of that chaos, then all the more better if in fact that can be you. So I want to make this flat statement here. By the way, that is the definition of chaos, the state of utter confusion and disorder, right? We're going to talk about the value of that today, obviously. By the way, I brought notes, so you can have them when we're done here today. So there's 2 slides coming up that are like paragraph text. It's the only text I have in my entire presentation today, and you're going to be tempted to write it all down, and I'm not going to give you a second to do it. So just heads up. Not to worry, you won't figure it out. So some of you are going to be like, hey, could you stop? You're going to find me ignoring you. So in order to prevent that, I've actually provided notes. So you'll have that today as well. This is a very important statement that ideas are, of course, the natural enemy of the way things are. This is why ideas are so argued about within our community. They're particularly argued with people who are with ideas or organizations or systems or frameworks that enjoy the status quo or enjoy the things the way that they are. It falls under the heading of, if it's not broken, why fix it? Well, because in most cases, the thing that you call isn't broken is breaking things in our community. You're just calling it not broken. So in fact, there are things that have to be disruptors within our community, and the best disruptor in our community and in any relationship is a well-executed and thoughtful idea. So ideas are the natural enemy of the way things are. The reason why I've presented this picture to you is because this is the Life Revitalization Center. It sits in what's classically referred to as the uptown of Toledo. You can see downtown Toledo in the background. The Life Revitalization Center was built in 1930 as the Macomber High School for boys. And so for years and years, it was the trade school for high school boys for years. And then right adjacent to it, in this blank property in the very foreground to your bottom right, was where the girls' school sat. It was Whitney High School. So for generations in Toledo, it was Macomber Whitney. It's where boys and girls went to learn trades development, from everything from how to type to how to build an airplane engine was happening between these two schools. And then in 1980, they merged because somebody finally came up with the bright idea that I guess guys can type, right? And so both schools became co-ed. And then in 1991, both buildings were closed by Toledo Public Schools. And in 2008, Whitney was torn down. The building that you see in front of you was slated to be torn down in June 2015. We purchased this building in March of 2013 with the idea that we could reinvigorate career and trade school development back in the Central City by focusing on adults. So that if you're in Central City, in any Central City, as it has happened all across our United States, and certainly in Toledo, if you're in Central City and you really wanted to work with your hands, in 1991, that option was removed from you. So your option was to figure out how to find transportation into the middle of a cornfield, which is where you find most colleges and schools. Certainly in our neck of the woods, all of our trade schools from Owens Community College, Northwest, and Terra are all sitting in the outlines areas away from urban centers, which means you have to drive to get to them. So our nearest educational opportunity is Owens Community College. This is a phenomenal group of people, and we'll chat a bit more about them in a quick minute, as are all the schools, by the way, that I've mentioned. But they're not in Central City. So that means you've got to get on a bus and you've got to go find them, or you've got to find transportation. I'm going to tell you two things about Center City people. See, I was raised in Center City my entire life in Central Cleveland. I grew up in a small village in Central Cleveland called Campedo, which means that it was a Puerto Rican community, which means that I thought I was Puerto Rican until somebody told me when I was 12 I was not. I was shocked because I didn't want to give up the rice and the peas. However, I still ate them. I'm going to tell you something, and then I've lived and worked in global cities around the globe for years. I'm going to tell you two things that are very consistent about Central City people. We don't like going to cornfields. We've seen the movies, we're not interested. We're not, right? If we're going to get disrupted, we want a street light so we know what we're going to get disrupted by. We're not really interested in the cornfields. And number two, we are very territorial and very neighborhood. So you can incite me and invite me and do everything and pay me to go get on a bus and go to a cornfield for education, but statistics will not bear you out because those ideas are unsustainable. Because eventually some new administration is going to say, why are we spending so much money on transportation? And that program is going to go away. By the way, what I just said is a statistical fact all across the United States. Transportation is unsustainable when you think about how do you change a community. If you really want to change a community, figure out how to put mobility under people so they can decide where they want to go for themselves. That's what you and I call autonomy. So that's a different idea, right? But here we thought, why not invite colleges to come back to Central City? What Cherry Street wisely decided not to do was to become an accredited college. I mean, come on. We could, but why should we, right? That's ridiculous. Why compete with Owens? It's a ridiculous proposition. Better yet, instead of competing with colleges and universities, why not just invite them to come home to Central Toledo? So that's exactly what we did. I'm happy to say that all three of the colleges that I've mentioned are under that roof today as I speak. All operating accredited college courses, all operating in the trades, and for the first time in 25 years, trades development has returned to Central City. So we're happy about that because we believe that poverty needs to be reversed and homelessness frankly, needs to come to an end. And we'll chat a bit more about that later as well. So let me get into my ideas with you guys, and hopefully by the end of the day we'll have, and at the end of the hour we'll have a moment to dialogue about it. Here's a statement that you're going to be tempted to write, but you don't need to write it because I'll make it available to you. So confusion and disorder, which is the definition for chaos, in your work and in your leadership should never be minded by you, providing as long as you're never confused or in a state of disorder about you, yourself, and what it is you are doing or creating. Most people run from chaos and chaotic situations and therefore don't create chaotic or chaos situations because they themselves are uncomfortable with the chaos going on inside of them. So if you can get to a state where you are no longer confused about you, and how many would agree with me this morning, there's entirely too many people roaming around on this planet that are in utter confusion about themselves. Yeah, so if you can get unconfused about you, then you'll never be confused or out of order with the things around you. It's that people are trying to control their environments without first controlling themselves. Harness your chaos. Harness the way you think. Harness the way that your mind works. Think about the value of it rather than the scatterness of it. So we have names for you. Scatterbrained, right? Scatterbrained people are the best innovators in our country. They've always been the best innovators in our country. Unfortunately, we're now filling them up with Ritalin. Is this a true statement or not? Yeah, we want that kid to calm down. Not because that kid needs to be calm, but because we're tired of him being uncalm. And so you've got to figure out how do you harness the disorder that is by design going off in you every day. Now I'd like you to ponder this for a moment. Because if you don't harness that, you're going to have to harness it some other way. Popularly referred to as addiction. So you're either going to have to drug it out, alcohol it out, sex it out, or if you have a sweet tooth, chocolate it out, work it out, church it out, or do something it out. In my line of work, which has been my line of work for the last 40 years, this is the bulk of men and women that I find across the table from me. They simply weren't taught that the chaos going on inside of you is by design, and you've been trying to medicate it or subsidize it your entire life. You this microphone so that I will not be confused by this microphone. Okay, fantastic. So, chaos, is this cool? You guys good? You okay? All right. Chaos is dreadfully minded. There's a period right there. Chaos is dreadfully minded by those around you. So for those of you that are developing teams, those of you that have developed teams, those of you who have staff, and you're trying to engineer and harness chaos that's going on because you've got an idea that you know darn well is going to create some chaos in your life, in your career, that's going to have a direct and immediate impact on the people around you. So number one, you have to appreciate the fact that that your chaos and the chaos that you're creating as a leader is going to be dreadfully minded by those around you. So every time you walk into the room, people are just going to sit there and roll their eyeballs. So you have to be really comfortable about facial expressions that don't mean what you think they mean and oftentimes mean exactly what you think they mean. So people in my organization invite me to meetings. I always ask them, are you sure? Because I actually embrace the disorder of God. I actually embrace God as the great perturbator because that's exactly who he is. He disrupts. The gospel disrupts. The gospel is always disruptive. So when we look at our work at Cherry Street and we talk about salvations, when we talk about leading and bringing people to Christ, then this is what we talk about. We don't talk about the fact that when you come to Christ, you get your truck back. This isn't a country western song played backwards, right? When you come to Christ, you're not going to get your truck back, and your wife's not going to come back. As a matter of fact, the gospel, and the moment that you become, and I hope you guys are tracking with me this morning, the moment that you accept Christ into your life is going to get worse. Do you know what the provision of the gospel is? Our only commission, which is discipleship. It's the only antidote. Because if you lead someone to Christ and you don't disciple them, you've only introduced disorder. But you've not brought the harness to the disorder. And so, of course, this is true. God is constantly working in our lives and working in our communities to bring about disorder. And when we embrace that, and we realize that the disorder is actually His order, because His order is not our order. How many would agree with me about that? What we call order, God's not interested in. And so when you begin to embrace these little things, then I think you can begin to embrace some of the ideas and some of the energy that's going on inside of your soul, inside of your mind every single day. Let me continue. So convince those in whom you depend to not resist the confusion and disorder. So as the chief executive officer at Cherry Street, I really have, over the years, merged into what Luncheon would describe the chief reminding officer. I remind people simply every day from meeting to meeting to meeting not to resist confusion and disorder. And then, instead, be critical in the solution to the confusion and disorder. So the thing that I need my team to constantly do is find their center and find their own ecosystem inside of what we're creating. Don't try to bring order and disorder and order and rightness to what it is we're doing. Better yet, find that calm and find that in you. But don't try to change this environment, because this environment has to be one of creation and innovation. And so I wonder out here today how many of you are in those kinds of environments right now that are innovative. Because innovative environments, whether it's at the factory floor level or at the architect's table, are all about, creative innovation is all about disorder, right? We call those artsy people. So I had this artist sit in my office the other day, and I said that my two younger sons are more artsy than my oldest two sons. And she looked at me and she goes, "How did you get two artsy sons?" I'm going, oh my goodness, right? You're sitting in the middle of my canvas. What do you mean I'm not artsy? I'm just not artsy with a brush. Right? So we all have that. Whatever it is that you're doing in your life and career, you have that going on inside of you. And more than likely, some of you are creating that. And more than likely, I'm speaking also to people here today that are constantly being hushed. So there are some of you that may be in this room where life and people around you are asking you to calm down, are asking you to hush. They're asking you to conform. They're asking you to get into line. But you find yourself every day not at your desk. You find yourself every day wandering around from the rank and file. And people are asking you, what's going on? Listen, I have my good friend Wayne right over here, right? So Wayne, I remember him from like years ago, almost 1,000 years ago, right? Where Wayne and I would be in pastors' meetings, and somebody, Daylene, you would have to bear me out here, somebody would be up here talking about something, and Wayne would just break out into a song. No permission. Just break out into a song and start singing. Why? Because the song that was inside of his heart was appropriate to what was being talked about. Wayne, yes or no? Yeah, you big disruptor, right? You cannot harness that, right, and sequester that and still have the same results. You've got to figure out, okay, how do I put Rome into my life? R-O-A-M, not Italy. But how do I put Rome into my life? And if you're in a leadership position, You've got to look at your teams and think and ask yourself this question: am I sitting on anyone else's creativity all the while expecting creativity? And so you have to think through these kinds of things. Let me just walk you through what I believe are 5 principles of chaos design. You guys good? Again, not the majority. Okay, I'm going to go with the minority this time. The rest of you are like, I don't know, keep going and we'll decide as we go. Okay. So I'm going to give you 5 principles that I think are necessary to start thinking through what I refer to as chaos architecture. So how do you get chaos working for you? Well, this is principle number 1 for me. Learn how to be blind and deaf to the right things. There are entirely too many people that see everything and hear everything. If you see everything and hear everything, then you're not the right kind of confused. You're the negative kind of confused. Because you're taking in entirely too much data. Learn for yourself what you have got to start being blind to and deaf to. I'll give you 2 examples of what I'm blind and deaf to. Number 1, I have a member of my team with me today, Joel Scuddy, and Joe will bear this out. My team wants me to understand the scale of the problem. So when I say, hey, you know that $3.5 million commercial kitchen that we're building? Yeah. It's scheduled to be open in July. I go, oh yeah, thank you so much for your input and data. I would need it open in June. No, you don't understand the scale of the problem. You're exactly correct. So I never understand the scale of the problem. As a matter of fact, I choose to be blind to the scale of the problem. So that's my example. I would ask you, what is it about you that you need to start being blind to? Maybe you're paying too much attention to the wrong thing and not enough attention to the right thing. Perhaps you're looking at whatever it is your Goliath is, or whatever it is, the thing that you have convinced yourself needs to be solved in order for you to begin to move forward, or in order for you to begin to launch into some innovative platform. I've just simply chosen for my life, and I noticed this early in life, that I probably spent the decades of my 30s trying to understand the scale of problems. So when people would say, Dan, please, until I began realizing, no, I actually have no natural proclivity to understanding the scale of the problem. And so I'm going to ask you to consider, what is your example? What are the things that you realize that every time you see this thing, it's actually working against you? That may be something that you're going to need to start being blind to. Maybe you just need to start being blind to it, right? Mine is this. Here's the thing that I'm deaf to. I refuse to hear the word can't. Matter of fact, I'm not entirely sure. I had to look this up just to spell it. That's not true. But you can't do it. Always my question is, based on what? When we opened our education wing at the Life Revitalization Center, when I was in high school, I was in wood shop and math on the same day. And I was learning to read, all on the same day. When you become an adult, something about the academic world forces you into a linear response. So I have to do this, and then I can do this, and then I can learn this, and then I can do that. And I simply said to all of our educators, I go, why can't it all happen at the same time? They said, of course it can't happen at the same time. They have to learn to read before they go to math. I go, that's not how I learned. I learned it in the same crazy day. How many remember elementary school? Right? There wasn't a whole semester of locking Dan Rogers in a room and teaching him to read. There was recess and lunch and friendship and math, all kinds of things. But there's something about the adult world that forces everybody into a linear approach. I did the math on it, and I realized that in that linear approach, From zero to graduation, it took anywhere in the neighborhood of 18 to 22 months. Now, you have a systemic problem going on in your life, whether it's drugs, addiction, poverty, or whatever the case may be, and someone says to you, you'll be whole in 18 months, trust me, man, you're done. You're gone. You can't even think past 18 minutes and somebody's telling you 18 months. And we're wondering why we're failing in central Toledo. And so I said, listen, could we at least practice? So I asked why. So like if we do this, will the federales, Mexico, right? Will the federales come and arrest us? I mean, is there some federal mandate that suggests we can't? Well, no. Will it disrupt accreditation? Is there anything that says we can't at least pilot ideas? Where in the same hallway, an adult could learn to read and weld and learn math at the same time. They go, no, I don't see why not. So that was 2 years ago. It's operating beautifully. See, people can figure it out. You just have to ask them to figure it out. So if there's no regulation or no law that you have to break, but it's just the rules that people have personally that get broken, then, put your big boy pants on. Let's get past the fact that your rule got broken, and let's do something else. Because I have to do that every day, don't you? How many of you got to put your big boy and big girl pants on every day, get over what yesterday was, and move on? Show of hands. Yeah, man, I don't know how you're surviving if you're not doing that. So I've learned that I'm deaf. And this is natural. This is not something that I've developed. I just learned, and my wife of 40 years will tell you that I've learned. She said when I was 17 years old, she wouldn't date me. Well, that's a completely unacceptable answer. I'm here, you're here, our species are opposite one another, we seem compatible. And so she will tell you the story that I stood in fire until my shoes began to melt, until she said yes. Now, in today's world, that's called stalking. I get it. But I just couldn't imagine in 1976 that there was a single reason why she wouldn't date me. Now, 40 years later, global traveling, now 10 grandchildren, actually. Our bio needs to be updated. We're doing well, right? She's running me ragged. So ask yourself this question. You've heard two examples of what I'm blind to and what I'm deaf to that are natural to me. I'm simply asking, if you do an internal inventory of your own life, if you audit yourself emotionally, ask yourself this question: what's natural to you that you wouldn't even have to develop? But if you embraced it and you began realizing, oh my gosh, I'm completely blind to that. And so instead of trying to get sight to that, accept that you're blind to that. Now, have people in your life, you guys have already run ahead and figured this out, have people in your life that have sight to that. My project manager, she sees the scale of the problem. That's what I need her to do. I need her to be the resistance to our ideas. Because if you look at a plane in aerodynamics, all planes need resistance just to take off. So it's necessary, just not too much. So her job is to provide the drag and the resistance to every idea I come up with. She has to understand and articulate well the scale of the problem. My role in the relationship is to ignore everything she's saying. And in that collaboration, we get liftoff, right? So you stay at it and stay at it until you know you'll win. Not you win, but you win as a team. Because chaos is not trying to be thwarted, but chaos is being harnessed. You and I live in a very binary world. So this is principle number 2. You and I live in a very binary world. Everything from racism to sexism, to homosexuality, to gun control. You and I live in a very binary world, which means that our society forces art out of the discussion. Here's my good friend Greta Harris. Hi, Greta. You didn't think I saw you. but you hard to ignore. Now, Greta, ex-Navy, I love that about Greta. Greta will come over to my house, not to see my wife, but to argue with me. Say yes, Greta. Yes, yes. She will bring me some topic and some discussion, and she's only there to pick a fight. And so we'll sit there for hours and hours and just argue back and forth and develop each other's skill. I love that about Greta. So Greta and I have chatted about racism. I don't know if you know this about Greta and I, but I'm white and she's black. And so society forces us into a binary discussion about that. Right? Which means either you are a racist or you're not a racist. But we're not allowed to have the artful conversations that Greta and I have at our table, where we talk about the fact that while I'm not a racist, I have racist views. So you're not allowed to say that in America today. You're not allowed to say that you are born in a culture where it was passed down generationally to you, views and ideas that you have to reconcile. And while you don't like those views and ideas, how will you ever reconcile them if you can't have a conversation about it? But we don't allow people even to have a discussion about topics and issues of the day. It's binary. Look at homosexuality. Either you are or you are not. Either you believe in it or you don't. Even in the church, we split right down the middle. We can't even have an artful discussion about anything. Please understand, your ideas, your innovation, your creativity, the things that you want to create in chaos are being forced inside of a binary world. And so when you begin to be creative and innovative, like homelessness can end. That's not an aspirational goal. That's a statement of fact. Well, now, then, homelessness can't end. Well, now, if you track the history of homelessness in the United States, it's less than 90 years old. Now, why should we let it continue just to get older? So there's whole topics of discussion that I want to have artful discussions about, but everything that I talk in terms of new ideas, I have to understand and appreciate. Principle number 2 is whatever I'm going to say is being heard in binary language. So we're not allowed to have yeses or nos. I mean, we're only allowed to have yeses or nos. We're not allowed to have, well, yes, with the following conditions, right? We're not. But you and I as innovators, you and I who embrace chaos, can stand in the middle of that binary world, call it what it is, and have the tools to get past it. So when people tell me, no, I can't, or you shouldn't, or be cited in this area, I just simply say to them, you know, the only reason why you're saying this to me is because you live in a binary world. That for you it has to be yes or no. So we'll eventually get to a yes or no because all things get down to that, but how did we get there is more the point. So that's principle number 2. Just embrace that. You and I live in a binary world, and I would challenge you today. If you have ideas in your life that are very, very binary, it's stomping all over your ability to create and live in and embrace chaos that will create all kinds of wonderful things. I would love for people to get this word out of this term out of their nomenclature, right? I particularly hate it when Christians go, God is the God of second chances. I'm like, my God, we're sitting in the middle of a theological seminary, so I'm just going to go theological for like a half rant. Okay, it won't even be a full rant, Greg, okay? It's a half rant. Here's my half rant. Stop it. Okay, there it is. Okay. So that's not very biblical literate, is it? It's poetic. You know, God is the God of second chances. But the reality is, it doesn't exist in any measurement. Matter of fact, if science even, or even God, your relationship to God, and your relationship to the way that God reacts in you, the same God that says, I'll give you 70 times 70 is personally not the God who tells you, okay, I'll give you one more chance. No, man. There's no literacy in that. And the reason why I believe and that you would, if you could, erase this term out of your personal nomenclature, that you're going to have a second chance. If you could erase that, then trust me, you're no longer thinking about what chance you're on. And that will be immeasurably helpful to you. Because if you're putting marks in your belt, if you're putting marks on the wall or in the board or in the fence post, and you're marking every chance that you've got, trust me, you're beginning to measure the wrong thing. And that is crippling. Matter of fact, this term over here stops mercilessly at creativity. So I just encourage you, if this is a part of your nomenclature, both personally, corporately, or in the community, or if this is your nomenclature, certainly theologically, I would challenge all of it today. Because this doesn't exist in the world you live in. It doesn't even exist, nor can it even be proven in your own life sitting here today at 12:50 on a Tuesday afternoon. No, my gosh, I'll prove it to you. I'm going to give you guys a question, and here's your participation today. Show of hands. How many of you, if you were God, would have killed you by now? Yeah, don't talk to me about second chances anymore. Right? I mean, God should not have only have wiped me off the face of the planet, he should have wiped my entire lineage off the face of the planet. But no, God is rich in mercy and grace, is he not? Oh, of course. You've got to, I would encourage you. You don't actually have to do anything. Allow me to encourage you to remove this frame out of the way that you think and out of the way that you speak. It stops mercilessly at creativity. Okay, that's principle number 3. Here's 4. I love to define collaborations with people and organizations in whom I have no business collaborating with. So collaboration, unfortunately, in America today, because we live in a binary world, do not forget, collaborations today are in-kind collaborations. So we collaborate with people who think like us and walk like us and look like us and talk like us, and our missions are aligned. Okay, so let me be gross for a quick minute, and this is on video, so I'm taking a big risk here, right? That's incest. So if you intermarry inside a family, you know what that produces, nothing good. And yet this is happening all across the spectrum of the nonprofit and church world. We only collaborate with people in whom we can have agreement. And so much creativity is lost as a result of that. Better yet, no. Stop for a moment. Sit and have a good cup of coffee. Just think, right? Never be afraid to sit and think. Think to yourself, who shouldn't I be working with? Am I right? Who shouldn't I be working with? And then you go have a conversation with them and convince them we should be working together. Trust me, you will find stiff resistance. Cherry Street is privately funded from one end to the other. We are 70 years old. We have never received a dime of government money. And yet 100% of partnerships that I have under a roof in that building are all federally funded. How? We have no business working together. We should not work together. But yet, we figured it out. So if I didn't have this framework, or you didn't have this framework, then the only chance that you have is to start, in our case, to be accredited college. I have a colleague in Holland, Michigan right now that is doing the very similar thing that we're doing in Toledo, but he's pursuing accreditation, and he's going to compete. He's a peer of mine, a colleague of mine who runs a rescue mission. And he's now positioned himself to compete in the collegiate world. Why? Well, it's because he doesn't have this framework. He doesn't realize that collaboration should be defined with people that will actually, drop kick you across the office. Right? Now think about that. Think about every dynamic relationship that you have, and think about how utterly different you are. And if, in fact, it was the sheer differences in the way that you are that create the collaboration that you experience. And so we go the easy route and frankly, the non-creative route too often by collaborating with organizations and people in whom we should, or in whom we have been told we must collaborate with. Because when people say, hey, Dan, you got to collaborate with these people, I'm like, must I? Well, yeah, they do the exact same thing you do. I'm like, then why should I? I want to do something with people who are the exact opposite of what I do. Because if we can mix and merge the genetic code of our organizations, we actually could create something dynamic, something that does not exist. But if my genetic code matches your genetic code, then what was the point of putting our genetic codes together? So just think about that. Think about in what ways can you begin to explore with some level of courage and some level of good old-fashioned bravery, explore conversations and ideas that previously would have eluded you because you thought collaboration should be in kind. I was talking to a group of guys yesterday, and I was talking to them about the value between agreement and alignment. Because I believe alignment is far greater than, and far more powerful than, alignment is far more greater than agreements. That in fact, I can get to agreement with you, but the most important thing that's going to keep us in this relationship is how aligned we are. I'll bring my wife back into this conversation. My wife and I will provide you a list of 20 critical things we're in complete disagreement about, starting with my motorcycle. She's completely in disagreement with me about that. I love it. She's not that thrilled. We're in disagreement about it. But you know what we are about? We're aligned to it. She's like, Dan, I see that brings you value. I go, yes, it does. She goes, wear a helmet. I go, yes, I will. See, that's alignment. I'm not entirely sure we'll ever be in agreement about it. But actually, my wife doesn't need to be in agreement with me about the motorcycle. And I don't need to be in agreement with her about whether I should have one. The reality of the thing that keeps us together in that conversation is that we're aligned by values, not by facts. And so you've got to think about, when you think about collaborations, think not first agreement, think about alignment and how you can align ideas and mix genetic codes to create something new. And then lastly, the fifth principle, and then I'll share with you a few more things, given the last few moments that I have. We'll take a poll and see if I should. The fifth principle that I have this morning is try your best to reinvigorate tired terms. So I find this as a high value. As a vocabularist, I value vocabulary at a very, very high level. I believe that words matter, and I believe that terms that define what it is you're doing matter. And so many people in our world today say things that they're unwilling to define their terms. And I'm like, that's not the way this works. You have to figure out what defines the terms that you're using. There are some words, these are the words that I've redefined in the last 10 years at Cherry Street. And I brought fresh meaning and fresh understanding to these tired words. And as a result of that, it elevates the conversation and allows me to have a conversation with people, with organizations, with community that they're not ready to have or not used to have or not used to having. And so if you can revigorate tired terms, then you can get out of semantics. I got into a bit of a tough with an area pastor. As you can see, I have a history of getting into toughs with people. I got into tough with a group of pastors a couple of weeks ago because he was using the definition of outcome, but he was actually using the definition of output, but using the word outcome. And I stopped him and I go, wait, that word you keep using, it doesn't mean what you think it means. Yeah, that's Princess Bride for those of you who are chuckling. Right? You keep using the word outcome, but what you're describing as an output. Outputs and outcomes are vastly different. I'll give you one example. So a meal. So Cherry Street today will serve more than 1,000 meals as we do 7 days a week year-round. Every single one of those meals are outputs. They're not an outcome. Inputs, how many people came to a meal? That's an input. Outcome, what happened as a result of that meal. But we would never be so silly as to call a meal an outcome. That's crazy talk, right? Because lunch doesn't solve hunger. It just solves lunch. Am I right? Yes or no? Yes, a resounding yes came from the crowd. So think about in your own world, in your own context, you'll keep having conversations with people, and here's where you'll know you need to start introducing new terms to what it is you're saying. It's when people do one of two things to you, as this pastor did to me. Tell me that what I'm saying is semantics, is the worst thing you can say to Dan Rogers. Number two, sit there and stare at me like you didn't hear what I just said. If that's happening to you, if you're using terms, you're trying to make your points, and people already turn you off because they think they know what you're talking about, then go back to your office, turn the lights off, shut the door, get alone with yourself, and ask yourself, in what way do I need to better honor my craft? Because every time I talk, I sound like somebody else. And so nobody's listening to me. Okay, well, listen, respect your craft, ladies and gentlemen. You have gifts and talents that are unique to you. They don't belong to anybody else. The only question is, are you respecting them? Are you coming out swinging like the unique individual you are? Your eyeballs, your earlobes, and your fingerprints don't match 7.3 billion people. Trust me, God went out of his way to call you unique. So when you talk like everybody else, and you're heard like everyone else is heard, then sequester yourself for a moment and just think to yourself, all right, my ideas can't make it past the nomenclature or the terms that are out there. Then think, okay, what am I really saying using the same word? What really needs to be said about this? And then get out there and practice it. Oh, trust me, you'll fall flat on your face, man, right? Not only because we live in a binary world, but because you'll need to go back and, hammer it out a little bit more. I cannot tell you how many times I've got to go back. I was working with this one donor on this new project it was about 6 years ago on this new project. And every time I chatted with him, he would slip me $10,000. And I knew this guy's capacity was far greater than 10 grand. And so instead of running back to my office, all thrilled that I was getting 10,000, I thought, the only thing I thought about all the way back to my office is, what am I not saying right? Because I'm handing you a $100,000 idea, and you're only hearing a $10,000 response. So rather than being thrilled with the 5 figure, I'm like, no, I know what I'm thinking about is worth way more than that. And it's going to need way more than that. This happened 4 times over a period of 18 months. Until finally, having heard from God the thing that I needed to hear from God, I crafted the language where I was completely convinced that for myself I could make the case and be dyed-in-the-wool about it and be confident whether I got another dime from this guy or not. And then came the larger gifts. Now, that's just a money example. But what would the thing happen if it was a relational example? Like you're talking across the coffee to somebody that you know this is a $100,000 idea, and they keep giving you $10,000 responses. No cash was exchanged. But you're putting dollars on the table, and they keep pitching you pennies. It's not them, my friends, that need to be convinced. It's you. Figure out what it is that I'm saying that makes me sound like everybody else, and stop that. Sincerely, on behalf of your uniqueness, stop that. I swear, I go to American churches today and everybody shops seemingly at Abercrombie. And I'm like, can't one of you guys shop at Savers like just once? I mean, you're older than me and you're wearing a necklace. Here's counsel for you that will cost you $200.25. Stop it. That was a little rant. It was almost a 3/4 rant there. Okay. Listen, it's 1:04. I have 4 ways that you could bring about engineering, but let me tell you, I have far more respect the time and energy you've put into being here today than I respect the 4 more points that I could bring. But we do have a few more moments, and I was just wondering if in the principles that I've outlined here today, if there might be any questions or dialogue that may erupt casually from the crowd today. Oh, come on, Finley, you can't let me get away with all of that. There has to be some question. You good? Greg? Okay. No, the only thing I didn't have a doubt about was what I was capable of and what I wasn't capable of against what I believe God called me to. And so in that tipping point question that you're referring to, I asked the board when we were 65 years old as an organization, running ahead 65 years, were we doing the same thing? If we're doing the same thing, and that was the answer and the will of the board, then I would have dismissed myself, because that would tell me that I've reached what the board asked me to reach, and then I would be occupying the seat of somebody that needed to occupy that seat, and I would have been happy. My wife tells me, before you were at Dan Rogers, you were at Dan Rogers. Don't forget that. The same is true for you, whatever your name is. Before you were whoever people think you were that person. That never changes. To answer your question, I just knew what God had called me to do. And if the answer came back, yes, we see ourselves doing the same thing, then I would have worked myself out of that position so that someone better than me would have occupied that seat. But the answer came back, no, we don't think we're doing the same thing 65 years from today as we're doing today. There was no commitment to what that might be. I had no idea what that might be. I just knew that we had already won the contest of what we were doing. Doing it more didn't seem interesting to me. Or doing scales or versions of it wasn't interesting to me. I hate that people come every day and remain in poverty. I hate that. I hate that homelessness doesn't have an answer. I hate it. And so if I was going to be a part of an organization that didn't hate it as much as I did, I would just have to go, right? So the only confidence I had to answer your question, Greg, was just the confidence in the call of God in my own life, and to follow that with as much integrity as I possibly could. Yeah. Greta.
One thing I think I deal with is sometimes I think, bigger than most people. Like if someone tells me to get like 15 people, I can go get 30.
Yeah.
I can just find 30, and I'd be thinking like, well, let's just do the 30 because I found the 30. That's, because I'd be thinking that God has, I always think that if you can think of a number, God has a bigger number for you. You know what I mean?
Yes, I agree.
Because and so what I'm struggling with now is I feel like I have to move myself forward to just do what I feel like, I have to make a change, because I can't always explain to people how I think, you know what I mean? And I don't want to dismiss their thinking. I just think bigger than they think,
Yeah.
And I just try to figure out what's the best way to do it, but I don't want to hurt. I just have to do what I feel like I got to do.
Yeah. Well, one thing's for sure, Greta, is, you're going to continue to work yourself into a place where you can be Greta, which would be my encouragement to all of you here today, is work yourself into a place in your community, in your life, where you can truly be you. Of course, you're going to have to know who you are before you attempt that. But also please understand that of course you are going to hurt people along the way. Of course you are. And it won't be on purpose, it'll just be by design. Because there's no way that you can create around you and not offend somebody. Trust me, people are going to be offended. And there are people who woke up that way, so okay, right? There's no way you can manage that in any world, right? But of course, I can't tell you over the years of this reinvention of Cherry Street, dozens of people that have been hurt and bruised along the way. We took a hard turn, and people fell off the ship, right? Even though we said, hey, a hard turn is coming. They still slipped off. right? As a leader, as a person who's creating, you hate that. But you have to hate not doing what God's called you to do more, right? And trust that, that you've built a strong enough community of people that will supplant the harm your creativity is creating. But you can't have it both ways is my point, right? It's like I want to plant a rose bush without a shovel because I do not want to crack open Mother Earth. Well, good luck with that, right? Because some surface of something is going to have to be cracked open in order for you to do that, right? The only thing you have going for you is honesty and integrity. Be honest with yourself and be super honest with the people around you. And if you know where you're going, make sure you have signaled well ahead of your turn what's happening so that when it happens, you can stand with integrity, but also stand with help. Yes. Yes, sir. Yeah.
So now businesses might be complaining and it's creating chaos
Yeah.
for them in many ways. So what good things or bad things do you anticipate like coming out of that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So we've created a loiter environment, right? So instead of chasing you off, we chase you in. So, there's a park that got developed 2 blocks from our mission. And because they don't like homeless people, this is City Park, they put up a no loitering sign. I'm like, so I took a picture of it and I went to the park officials and I said, by the way, here's the definition of loiter and here's the definition of park. They're the same definition, right? I mean, since parks are all about legal loitering, right? Like we actually want you to loiter. Look, we have provided grass. It's not that you don't want people laying on your grass. You just don't want people you have unapproved to lay on your grass. So could we have a smaller conversation about classism? They hate this discussion. We have created a system of loiter, right? We actually need you to loiter. So the more you loiter is like your kids coming home every day after school. That's not anything more than you're encouraging them to loiter, right? Because if you're out in the street, as your dad, I can't help you. But when you're here, we can do something together. So you've got to create systems that would commonly be called as inclusion, which I think is a ridiculous word. I like loiter better, right? Because good things happen when people sit and think. But I can't think with you if you're out running around being an idiot, right? So being here and being an idiot, that's good. We can share idiocy. That's fantastic. But I don't want to hear about you being an idiot. I want to see you doing an idiot. And if you're not here, I can't see you being an idiot, and I would prefer seeing it, right? So you have to change your mind about things with respect to that. By the way, businesses love that, right? Right up until they walk up and they're like, I had one business guy come up. There's people milling around outside. He's like, Dan, I've got to walk through people to get here. I'm like, so you've never gone to the mall or home, right? Because sometimes I got to walk past my wife to get into the house. Or is it you don't like walking through those people, right? Which again is classism. We can have a different discussion. So they want me to be Moses and part the Red Sea of people. I'm not entirely sure what you want from me. Other questions? Yes, sir. Oh, I told him that the sign comes down that day or it's on the front page of the Blade. Yeah, people hate that. Yeah, because it was sound logic, right? I mean, loiter and park are the same definition. So you're just being a classist. You're asking one member of the community to loiter. You're asking another member of the community to not loiter. And back in my house is an arboretum, right? My neighbor took a picture of 4 of our guests. Our women's guests, the Sparrow Sisters right down the street, were drinking in the park. He took a picture. And he said, Dan, some of your guests are in our park drinking in the middle of the day. Now listen, I'm excited about that. I'm like, well, wait. That's not what we're thinking about. So I dispatched a team. We went over and we engaged the people. They were drinking in the park. That was legitimate. We helped move them along, get them in the program. Whatever the case was, except for the fact that following Sunday we were having party in the park. I don't know if you've ever been to one of these things, but people drink. So I went around, and Dan was standing there. Dan Schaefer is my neighbor, and I took pictures of people laying on the grass drinking. So I went over. I didn't even send it to him. I just walked over to him, and I flipped open my phone, and I go, hey, Dan, not for nothing. Don't be alarmed, but people are drinking in the park. Right? I mean, it's okay if we do it. We just have to be approved to do it, I guess. All right. Anything else, you guys? All right. You've been great. Thank you so very much.